Of course, I shut off the video to remember what it was I was going to talk about, and I remember what I was going to talk about. So now I've got two videos I've got to stitch together or post separately. But some of you may know that I have an aunt and an uncle who have sold their big family house now that their sons have grown up and moved away, and they've moved into a senior community condo, but they're selling their big house that they had. My uncle was an MD, so they had a nice house, and it was a very eccentric, fun house because my aunt is a very eccentric, fun lady. She shocked the family by wearing all black with patterned stockings when she first entered the family. She served things like escargot and frog's legs at her Christmas parties, and she had a red wall in her living room. Nobody had a red wall back then in the 60s. But she had a red wall. She had a cage of finches in the breakfast room. She had a totem pole with a big sun face on it. Eclectic ethnic artifacts that she collected from their world travels. Wonderful house. It flowed well. Had a circular floor plan, so that when you circulate in parties, it's best to have a circular plan with no dead ends, and that's how the house was. Anyway, the house is for sale, and some of you may know because I shared with you the listing that my aunt posted on her Facebook. But I haven't talked about my other aunt now. These are some of the more affluent members of my family. My uncle, who's an MD, and I have also had another uncle who is the VP of State Farm, and he had a huge house. And they have since sold that one, and they built and moved into their lake house in a I don't know what you want to call it, a gated community or something like that in Arkansas. But anyway, their big house in Bloomington, their original house, that was a trip too, in a different way. Where Aunt Sue was bohemian and exotic, Aunt Charlotte was very stiff. Well, I can't say that because she wasn't stiff, but her ways were stiff. Aunt Charlotte was always very sweet and very kind, but formal. Her house was impeccably formal, and I don't know if she did that because of their status at the company and in their society, but they had sort of what you might call an old-fashioned front room, parlor, in the house, where nobody was allowed to go except for VIPs. It was almost sort of roped off, if you will, and it was kept immaculate and pristine, and nobody was allowed in that room because it was to be kept for important people. So whenever we would be over there, one of my sisters, to be spiteful, would just reach one toe into the room and tap around on the carpeting and then bring her leg back, when nobody was looking, of course, just to be spiteful. But this aunt was eccentric also in a OCD kind of way. She could well have afforded to have had a maid, and she might have had some type of help to do some of the things. I don't really know, because it was a huge house, but I don't really think she did. She didn't come from money, but so she did a lot of her own household chores and everything, but she was weird about it. Every room had its own dust cloth. You could not use the dining room dust cloth in the living room, or vice versa. That would drive her up the wall. Things like that. Very OCD. Unfortunately now she's got Alzheimer's, which is very sad. Oh, there goes a hummingbird. What else was I going to say about Aunt Charlotte? Uncle Norman was a card, her husband, my blood uncle. He would, whenever we would have a volleyball game before he served, he would gobble like a turkey. And he would serve. And my brother Mike, my brother who's passed away, he was very much the same way. Whenever, like, we were playing volleyball or some sport and the ball would go off into the lilac bushes, Mike would do jungle noises. Ooh, 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 ah, ah, ah. Just crazy ass people. But Aunt Charlotte and Uncle Norman, I guess, they would have, of course, very important VIP parties related to the work, and my cousins, their children, their role would be to take the coats and smile and then disappear. They were to be seen and not heard. Maybe serve an hors d'oeuvre or two and then beat it. It's funny because they are not that way at all now that they are grown-up kids. Anyway, I've just been reminiscing a lot. It's starting to bother me that my past is becoming memory. You know, I have one brother who's in the ground already. My parents are reaching 90. I'm really lucky that they're still around. Aunts and uncles also getting old, getting up there. Some have passed away. Family houses being sold. And it just bothers me. There's everyone. I guess you have to come to a point where you get philosophical about it and realize that that's life. Okay, well, this was just another video that I thought I would throw out there. Bye.